September 1957, Reno, Nevada. A veterinary clinic on the corner of Wells Avenue and East 2nd Street. A plain, single-story building with a green awning and a painted sign above the door. At 8 in the morning, a man walks up Wells Avenue carrying a dog in both arms. The dog is a 9-year-old black Labrador named Duke. The man is 63 years old. He walks slowly because the dog is heavy and because he has not slept. He has been sitting up with the dog since Tuesday. Today is Friday. He pushes through the clinic door with his shoulder because both arms are full. In the parking lot across the street, a man in a tan Stetson and a canvas jacket sits in a station wagon with the engine off. He has been watching since the man turned the corner on Wells Avenue. The slow walk, the careful way he carries the weight, the way he pushes through the door with his shoulder because both arms are full and he will not put the dog down. He does not start the engine. Nobody recognizes him yet. Here is the story. Walter Greer came home from the Pacific in 1945 with a shrapnel scar on his left forearm and a way of sleeping that was never quite right again. He married a woman named Helen from Sparks in 1946. They had no children. Helen said it was fine. Walter said it was fine. It was fine. They lived in a small house on Plumas Street for 31 years, and Walter worked the line at the Nevada packing plant and came home every evening, and Helen had supper on the table, and they listened to the radio, and that was enough. It was more than enough. It was a life. Helen died in March of 1956. Pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis. She was 58 years old. Walter sat in the hospital room the last 3 days and held her hand and did not sleep. After the funeral, he went back to the house on Plumas Street and sat in the kitchen for a long time. Then he went to the animal shelter on Sutro Street and came home with a 9-year-old black Labrador that nobody had wanted because he was too old and too slow, and not what people came to shelters looking for. Walter named him Duke. Duke slept at the foot of Walter's bed every night for a year and 3 months. He was there in the mornings when the not quite right sleeping left Walter awake at 4 in the morning with the Pacific still in his head. He was there in the evenings when the house on Plumas Street was quiet in the way houses are quiet when the person who filled them is gone. He was not Helen. He was not a substitute for Helen. He was a 9-year-old black Labrador who leaned against Walter's leg when Walter sat in the kitchen, and that was what Walter needed. The tumor appeared in August. The veterinarian on Wells Avenue found it during a routine exam, a mass near the spleen, large and fast-moving. He explained the options. Surgery was $340. Walter's savings after the funeral and the last year of bills were $47. He did not tell the veterinarian this. He thanked him and carried Duke home and sat in the kitchen and looked at his hands on the table for a long time. Please press the hype button on your phone to support my videos and me. He did not sleep much in September. He sat up with Duke most nights, the dog's head in his lap, the house on Plumas Street quiet around them. He fed Duke the good food, the kind he usually saved for Sundays. He took him slow walks around the block in the early morning when the Reno air was cool. He talked to him the way men talk to dogs when there is no one else to talk to. Not about anything in particular, just the sound of a voice in a quiet house. On Friday morning, he carried Duke to the clinic on Wells Avenue. He could not pay for the surgery. He could not watch the dog die slowly. He had made the decision the way men make decisions they do not want to make. Quietly, over several nights, alone. The man in the tan Stetson gets out of the station wagon. He does not hurry. He crosses Wells Avenue at the pace of a man who has already decided what he is going to do, and the only thing left is the crossing. He pushes through the clinic door. Walter is at the front desk. He has Duke in both arms. The dog is still, head resting on Walter's forearm, eyes open. The receptionist has a form on the counter and a pen, and the practiced expression of someone who does this work with as much kindness as it allows. The man in the Stetson stops beside Walter. He does not introduce himself. He looks at Duke first, at the dog's eyes, at the way he is lying in Walter's arms, at the gray around his muzzle. Then he looks at the form on the desk, then at Walter. How old? Walter looks at him. The question is unexpected. 9. The man reaches over and puts his hand on Duke's head, flat and still, the way he touches things he wants to understand. He holds it there for a moment. Duke's tail moves once, a single, slow sweep. the tale of a dog who is tired and in pain and still, despite everything, glad to be touched. The man looks at that for a moment. Then he looks at the receptionist. "Get the doctor out here." The receptionist looks up from the form. "Sir, he's with a patient." "I understand that. Get him out here." Something in his voice, not loud, not demanding, just completely certain, makes her set the pen down. She goes. Walter looks at the man beside him. He does not know the face yet. He is 63 years old and tired in the way men are tired when they have been awake for 3 days, and he does not have the energy for whatever this is. "Mister, this is my business." The man looks at him. "What's the tumor running?" Walter is quiet for a moment. $340 for the surgery. He pauses. "I don't have it." The man nods. He looks at Duke. "How long has he been with you?" "A year and 3 months. Walter does not say what the year and 3 months has meant. He does not need to. The man looks at him for a moment, and then looks at Duke, and Walter can see that the man has understood without being told, the way some people understand things without needing the words. The veterinarian comes out from the back. He is a man in his late 40s, gray at the temples, in a white coat. He stops when he sees who is standing at his front desk. His expression changes in the way expressions change when a face you have seen on movie screens is suddenly 3 feet in front of you in a veterinary clinic in Reno on a Friday morning. Where are you watching from? Drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. The man in the Stetson does not give the veterinarian time to say anything. He looks at Duke in Walter's arms. He looks at the form on the desk that Walter has not yet signed. He looks at the veterinarian. "Can you save him?" The veterinarian looks at Duke. He looks at the way the dog is lying, reads what he sees the way veterinarians read animals. "The surgery is complex," he says. "The mass is large. But it is not spread to where it would be inoperable. With the right approach, yes." He believed so. The man reaches into his jacket pocket and takes out his wallet. He opens it on the front desk in the morning light of the clinic. He counts out $400 onto the counter, $100 bills, one at a time, the way he always counts money, slowly, openly, in front of whoever needs to witness it. He straightens the stack with one hand and pushes it across the counter. "You do whatever he needs," he says to the veterinarian. "Whatever is left over, you use for the next person who comes through that door and can't cover it." Then he looks at Walter. Walter is looking at the money, then at the man, then at Duke, heavy and still in his arms, the old dog's head on his forearm where it has been for $400 worth of mornings. "Mister, I can't take this." The man looks at him. "I know you can't." He looks at Duke. "Your dog's name is Duke." Walter looks at him. "How did you know that?" "I heard you say it on the sidewalk when you came around the corner," the man says. He pauses. "A man names his dog Duke. He's got good taste." He closes his wallet. "Let them take him in." Walter stands at the counter for a long moment. Duke's head is still on his forearm. The dog's eyes are open and calm, the eyes of an old dog who trusts the man holding him completely and without condition, the way only old dogs trust, the way that takes years to earn. Walter hands Duke to the veterinary technician who has come out from the back. It takes a moment. His arms do not want to let go. Then they do. He watches them carry the dog through the door. Then he stands at the front desk with his hands at his sides. He turns to the man in the Stetson. "Who are you? I'd like to know who to thank." The man has already moved toward the door. He stops. He looks back at Walter. "You named that dog Duke," he says. "I'm partial to the name." He pushes through the clinic door and crosses Wells Avenue to the parking lot. Walter stands at the front desk of the veterinary clinic on Wells Avenue and watches through the window as the man gets into the station wagon and pulls out of the parking lot. He watches until the wagon turns the corner and is gone. The receptionist behind the desk says his name quietly. He turns. She is holding a receipt for the $400. She says the doctor wants him to wait in the examination room. They will come and get him when the surgery is over. He takes both. He goes and sits in the examination room. It is a small room, white walls, the examination table in the center, a poster about heartworm prevention on the wall. He sits in the plastic chair in the corner and holds the receipt in both hands and looks at the number on it. $400. He looks at it for a long time. He thinks about the man who said he heard him say the dog's name on the sidewalk. He thinks about being watched on Wells Avenue and not knowing it. He thinks about what it means that a stranger watched him turn the corner carrying a dying dog and got out of his car. He thinks about Helen, who would have known exactly what to say about all of this, and who is not here to say it. He folds the receipt and puts it in his shirt pocket, and sits in the plastic chair and waits for them to come and tell him about Duke. He found out who the man was 2 days later. Duke was out of surgery and resting, and the veterinarian had said it had gone as well as it could have gone, better than he had expected. Walter had barely left the clinic. He slept in the waiting room chair the first night. The staff brought him coffee in the morning without being asked. On the second afternoon, he was sitting in the waiting room when a woman came in with a retriever and stopped in front of the framed donor photograph on the south wall. It was a photograph from several years earlier, a charitable donation to the clinic, unrelated to anything that had happened that week. The woman recognized the face in the photograph and said the name out loud to her husband, the way you say a name when you are surprised to see it somewhere you did not expect it. Walter looked up at the photograph. He looked at the face. He looked at the name below it. He sat with that for a long time. He did not say anything to the woman or her husband. He did not say anything to anyone in the waiting room. He went back to sit with Duke. Duke lived for 3 more years. He slowed down in 1959 and slowed down more in 1960, but he was still at the foot of Walter's bed every night, and still on the slow morning walks around the block, and still leaning against Walter's leg when Walter sat in the kitchen. In his last months, he slept more and ate less, and sometimes Walter would sit beside him on the floor in the evenings, his back against the wall, the dog's head in his lap, the Reno night quiet outside the windows on Plumas Street. He died in December of 1960 at the age of 12, at the foot of the bed, in his sleep, which is the way a good dog deserves to go. Walter sat with him for a long time in the morning before he called anyone. The house was very quiet. He made coffee and drank it at the kitchen table, and looked out the window at the backyard, and thought about things it does not help to think about for too long. He buried Duke that afternoon under the cottonwood tree in the backyard, the one Helen had planted in the spring of 1951. He put a flat river stone from the truckee on the grave. He did not write anything on it. He did not need to. He knew where it was, and he knew what it was, and that was enough. Walter Greer lived in the house on Plumas Street until 1971. He was 77 years old when he died. His neighbor found him in the kitchen on a Tuesday morning in February, which is where Walter had always spent his mornings, at the table with coffee, looking out at the backyard and the cottonwood tree and the flat river stone under it. The house was exactly as he had kept it for 31 years. The neighbor said later that it was the tidiest house she had ever been inside, and that there was still coffee in the pot. John Wayne never spoke of the veterinary clinic on Wells Avenue to any reporter or writer. He drove on from Reno that morning and did not mention stopping. In the waiting room of the veterinary clinic on Wells Avenue, the framed donor photograph is still on the wall. The clinic has changed hands twice since 1957. The photograph stayed. It is on the south wall near the window, in a plain frame. Below the photograph, the donor's name. Below the name, the year of the donation. On the river stone under the cottonwood tree in the backyard of the house on Plumas Street, nothing is written. But it is there. The cottonwood is very tall now. The new owners of the house do not know what the stone marks. They have left it where it is because it seemed like something that ought to be left where it is. The light comes through the cottonwood leaves in the afternoon and lies across the stone for a while. Then it moves on. If this story reached you, do me a favor. Pass it on. Share it with someone who has ever loved a dog. There are more stories coming.